Good morning and welcome to another Sonic Storytime. Good morning to you no matter what time you're watching this. And welcome to three little vignettes that I like to call the case of the poorly given instructions, or communication breakdown. These are three little examples of how communicating clearly could help to make sure things go smoothly and well. All three of these short stories highlight the need for quality communication and the fact that clear instruction and communication could prevent everything from misunderstanding to some very expensive repairs being needed. So, on to today's story. For several years, I used to go down to a conference in Nashville, the Producers and Engineers Summit, at a place called Welcome to 1979. And I haven't been able to go for quite a few years now. I'm hoping to get back. But I'll tell you what, if you're in the Nashville area and you're looking for a place to record, you want to look up Chris Mara. He's a great guy and really knows his stuff and has a beautiful studio that is in a vintage building and is decked out with amazing vintage analog stuff. If you are not in the Nashville area and you are looking for someone to mix your record or help you with mastering or get your music ready for vinyl, or even broker with a great vinyl facility down in Nashville getting your record pressed, you should also look up Chris Mara. And if you are a studio owner or a very well-off hi-fi enthusiast and you're looking for a quality analog reel-to-reel deck, or need any kind of service or instructions in that area, then you're going to want to look up Chris Mara at Welcome to 1979. So there's my plug. You know, full disclosure, you know, he's not a advertiser or anything like that. I just think he's a great guy doing a great job, and he's really put something beautiful together down at Welcome to 1979. So if you ever get a chance to visit, it's well worth your time. Okay, so I used to go to an annual event he puts on every year, and I'm hoping to get back there someday. In any event, in Nashville, I can't remember whether it was my first time or my third time, but I was checking into a hotel, and there's a bit of a cultural dichotomy between the North and the South, and that also leads to somewhat of a language barrier. I don't think Southern English versus Northern English qualifies as a dialect. I'm not sure if it does or not. I mean, I'm not a language expert, but I can tell you it is very different for those of us who are not born in the South and speak in a Southern manner. So I was trying to check into a hotel, and I was having a little trouble understanding the gal who was checking me in. But we were getting through all the questions she had to ask me, and then she said, "Do you have your PS with you?" And I said, "Pardon me? Do you have any PS with you? PS?" And I said, "Do I have any PS with me?" And I wasn't trying to be a wise, you know, I was just really trying to understand, and I was struggling. She said, "Do you have any PS with you?" Well, we went around and around that tree for a bit until I realized she was asking if I brought any pets with me. For instance, a dog or a cat, which I hadn't. So I did not need a pet-friendly room, and I did not need another hotel. But perhaps, I don't know, writing that sentence down may have been a way around our dilemma a little bit more efficiently and quickly. Just an example of clear communication being paramount in such simple vendor to consumer transactions. I've spoken several times about my time working in radio the first time around. I'm doing some more of that again now, but way back in the day, as a young man, I worked in jazz radio, in public radio, and early on, excuse me, I had probably the bare minimum technical training needed to do what I was doing, but I really didn't know the job thoroughly and all the ins, outs, and whys. And it was early. It was probably my first, and if not my first time on the air alone and by myself, it was the second or third. It was early in my on-air broadcasting career. And I had to do what's called meeting the network. At the end of my shift, at the end of my program, a network show would come in and we would have to, meet them at the appointed hour. Let's say it was a Saturday, because I believe it was. It would be like at 1 o'clock or something. A network news show would come up. That was called meeting the network. You would dial it up on the board, and it's supposed to be there. Nowadays, there's a computer screen, and even if you're like a few minutes off or whatever, it's okay, because it's streaming and it's preloaded, and you just touch the screen and it comes up. Back then, you had to meet it at the exact time, and if it didn't work, you were in trouble. And we had a satellite dish, and these they were called D-mods. They were special receivers, demodulators, in the back room that could bring in the channels that you needed. Well, I dialed up the network and it didn't come. It wasn't there. Something was wrong. And I had no idea what to do. So now we've got dead air, and that's never any good. I think I slapped a record on and just kept the program going. But that's not what was supposed to be on. So then I'm calling around, and I call at that time, the operations manager. He wasn't in, and I call the program director, and he says, well, you need to call the chief engineer, which I did. His name was Dick, interestingly enough. And I call it gruff guy, the typical engineer type, not necessarily a lot of people skills, probably pretty good with a soldering iron. And I called him, and he walked me through the steps in a gruff and why are you calling me on a Saturday manner, but he walked me through the steps needed to get the network dialed in on the D-mods, so then I could then get it up on the board and put the program on that was supposed to be there. And he told me that, well, there's these two switches. You need to push them up and then dial in this channel manually, and then you'll be able to do what you need to do. And I said, they're not budging. And he said, you got to work them. You just got to put them up. Those switches need to be up, or it's not going to work. He said that about 3 or 4 times. So I forced the switch up, and it went into place, both of them. I heard a funny sound, though, and I wasn't sure that it was right. I dialed in the channels and went back to the control room and dialed up the network show, and there it was. So Okay. Well, what Dick had failed to tell me, and what I later took the heat for, which is interesting because I had no experience with this stuff, and he's the guy that installed this equipment, but they were locking switches. I don't know if anybody's ever seen locking switches, but you're not supposed to force them up if they're not moving. There's a little sleeve that you pull up first and then push because it's locked in position, so it can't accidentally be bumped. But if you just press it through and force it beyond the lock, you can get it to do that, but you've just tanked a $500 switch at the time, so probably $5,000 now. I don't know. So later I got called into the office and got a talking to, and things were a bit tense and tenuous for a while. And I was too young to really advocate for myself, but this is the chief engineer that told me to do that. If they were locking switches, why didn't he tell me to unlock them first? Was it because he was in a hurry to get on with his Saturday afternoon? A great time to have some awesome communication, because that would have helped me out. He would have been doing his job properly, and everyone would have saved some money at the radio station because they wouldn't have had to replace all those switches and that gear. Clear communication, kids. It's really important. Vignette number 3 was a story that was told to me and the rest of the class that I was taking at the time by the late, great Steve Bradley, a musician, electronics authority extraordinaire, recording engineer, and audio specialist. He was a great guy who mentored a lot of people at the University of Buffalo. He died very young. I was just looking at his obit from, I don't know how many years ago now, 10, 15 years ago, whatever it was. And he was, maybe it's more than that, I don't remember. But anyway, he was a year younger than I am now. So, to be honest with you, to me, that's very young. So, God rest his soul, and thank you, Steve, for all the awesome knowledge that you gave to so many for so many years. Anyway, at one point he told us a story that also highlights the need for clear communication and avoiding assumptions. Many years prior to the time he told me this story, so I'm assuming back in the 60s or 70s maybe, because this was in the 80s when we heard this. Prior to that time, he had been working as a high-end audiophile stereo salesman. And this is long, long before the days of Bluetooth speakers and, self-powered, speakers with their own amps in them and all that stuff that we have today. So keep that in mind. A gentleman came into the store, seemed to have done his research and really know all about the equipment that he was looking at. And I guess Steve was helping him out, and he got, a bunch of questions answered and seemed to have all the specs together, and he bought a pair of speakers. I don't know what they were. Let's say they were Advent. I mean, that's not really high-end. I don't know. Whatever it was he bought something that was the thing at the time. And they were pretty expensive. And they did come with a warranty. He was very happy with his purchase. He took them home and then called the store about a week later to say, hey, these aren't working. There's something really wrong with these speakers. I want my money back or an exchange. What's going on here? And the guy said, well, bring him in, we'll take a look. And what this guy had done Remember, this is long before Wi-Fi, streaming, beaming technology of any kind, other than standard radio. He took the speakers home, did not have an amp to hook them up to, did not have a turntable or any of that. Well, apparently, because he got some lamp cord and some 2-prong plugs, wired them directly to the backs of the speakers, plugged them into the wall, and not only wondered why there wasn't any music coming out, but was surprised to see them light on fire and melt down. Knowledgeable people are not always what they seem. Seemingly knowledgeable people are not always what they seem. We learned that in the story of the lost concert. So I guess clear communication also involves asking the right questions. And that's a situation that certainly could have been avoided by either one of them, the salesperson or the customer, just digging a little deeper and trying to make their wants, needs, and desires known. I'm sure somebody would have told them, the technology you're looking for won't exist for another 20 or 30 years. Let's sell you a stereo. Anyway, those are a few stories specifically around music and audio, but I'm sure there's thousands in everyone's everyday walk of life where communication, an opportunity for great communication, was lost, and therefore hilarious hijinks ensued. If you have any stories, any thoughts on these stories, any questions, anything you'd like to add to the conversation, love to see you posted down below. Thanks for joining us for Storytime. And the moral, I think, is obvious of all these stories. Speak clearly, ask good questions, and listen to the answers. All right, we'll see you next time on Storytime. Thanks. Bye-bye.